You're listening to a Very Spatial Podcast, episode 739, June 19th, 2024. Hello and welcome to a Very Spatial Podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb. And this is Frank.
And Sue and I are still quasi without voice. It's still not quite back. So we were gone to Japan. Thank you to Barb and Frank for covering us on that episode. Then we got back and we're supposed to do another episode. So it's been a month now since we were supposed to do, or since our last episode, a month and a half since Sue and I have been on, because we were in Japan and then we were sick from coming back from Japan. And that's the thing is, in Japan, fine. Get back from Japan.
I know it was tough. Like in Japan, I didn't even have my allergies in Japan. Like it was amazing. I could like breathe all the time and my eyes weren't itching. Get on the plane system, the train system, whatever, the transit to come back at full force, got sick. The allergies came back.
They had to make up for lost time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we were supposed to record on Sunday, but then I was in Chicago for work. So it's been a whole thing.
Yeah. Things happen.
But yeah, so that's our housekeeping. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night. No. So kicking off this week in the news, Google, of course, has been maintaining your location history for over a decade now. And you can go in, if you haven't turned it off at least, go in, look at your location history, see what you've done, where you've been. And all of this is just in the cloud until December. So if you've been using Google location history and you want to have access to that data, that is one, changing names because it's Google. It's going to become Google Timeline. And two, Google Timeline is going to live on your device. So security is going to be better. Nobody can really ask Google for your location history if they don't have it on their servers. So, it goes into security. It goes into just more modern ways of dealing with a lot of this data is, to keep it on device as opposed to putting up in the cloud. We could talk about the whole conversations at both Google I/O and Apple's WWDC about doing things on device as opposed to pushing everything to the cloud all the way to AI. So there's, this general trend to take advantage of the more robust devices that we have to keep more things there. And this is just another trend of that. But in the end, if you are using Google location history, if you want to have access to that data in the future beyond December 2024, be sure to go to your account and download that data because after December, it's going to go away.
Can we talk a minute about a little bit of history here? Everything's on the device. No, it goes to the cloud. It's better. No, it's back to the device. Come on.
I know. I was just thinking that, right? Back and forth.
It's just like, it's because your phone's better than it was. Well, yeah, but come on. Computers are better than they were too. And then
we all know that really what it means is they're tired of answering requests for data from various agencies. And this just, makes it easier for them because they don't have to have somebody there providing that data or saying, no, you can't have the data.
My guess is the network storage and network traffic bill came and they were like, how much?
See, that's what I thought when I read this. I'm like, they're just tired of storing it. I mean, not that it's like a drop in the bucket of what Google stores maybe, but I'm like, I think they're just tired of doing it too. But then when you said that, I'm like, that's a good point. If you don't have it, people can't demand it.
Well, also tie into that, more and more they're pointing Gemini at their own servers to look at things. And so people can't say, well, you used my location data to train your AI if the location data isn't living on the server.
It's just, it's a little bit exasperating for me as having been around long enough to see this trend. And then, what it is the verbiage, the PR around some of this stuff is move to the cloud because it's just better in the cloud and everything's in the cloud. You always have it because cloud and cloud, always cloud. And then those of us, myself included, went, well, maybe not always cloud. There's some pluses and minuses. No, you're an idiot. It's always cloud. Okay. and they get on board, and now they're like, oh, back to the device. It's better. It's device, better device. It's like, come on, man. It's just frustrating.
A lot of this too is going back to you being responsible for your data and manually. You're going to be able to sync across devices still, but it's not going to happen by default. And I wanted to figure out, like, how much time do you have with this location history? And now it's going to be, they're going to delete past locations after 3 months. So you're going to have a backup plan, like when, back to when am I going to do this every month and go through all my devices and in apps and figure out how to store things.
If you're someone who wants to have a long-term history of your stuff, there's also lots of apps that'll do it for you. So it's not like you're limited to just Google or Microsoft or Apple's storing your data. You can actually run apps that'll do this for you in the background. So speaking of Google, of course, there were updates to Google Maps for Google I/O. Yes, it's been that long since we had a conversation about news. Is that Google I/O, Microsoft Build, and WWDC have all happened since our last podcast. So as you might imagine, they're pushing more of AI into the Places API. They're kind of rolling out more capabilities in the 3D maps and the Maps JavaScript API. Again, not new, but just kind of adding more. And this includes some of the things from geospatial AR that they announced last year. More of that's coming into, what's it called? Street View and the 3D view in maps. Yeah, and open source React components. So you can, if you're making React interfaces, they're making that in theory a little bit easier. And I have, since React is more JavaScript, I haven't really done a lot of it. So I'm assuming Frank, since he's not doing as much web stuff, hasn't even really done a lot with React yet.
So React is one of those frameworks. So what the annoying thing about this entire world is that there's like 70 or so frameworks are released a week, it feels like. And so it's like there's so many of them and trying to figure out what is the one that's the dominant one. React actually has come out ahead. And so if you're doing anything in JavaScript, you really should start embracing React. But I personally found for most of my work, it was way more overhead than I needed to do the things that I needed. So it was kind of, I didn't use it a lot. So I'm familiar with it and I played with it and I've not really implemented it a whole lot because it's creating a huge infrastructure around what wasn't a lot of change for my particular application. But it's pretty cool if you're adding in a map to a bigger platform or bigger application. This is a really good addition because React makes it pretty easy to just go put widget here, more or less.
Yeah. So all of these things are things that they highlighted in their announcement. And again, it's not like these were the only things geospatial related at Google I/O. So you can go and search more things. But this is the one that we pulled that kind of highlighted a few of these.
How do we feel about Gemini?
I've not used Gemini.
I've not tried it either.
I have. And I'm not sure that was it's a bold move, Google. Let's see how it plays out.
I was actually thinking that too, that they're always at the forefront of this type of capability, going back 20 years with the original API. But I also am very conflicted about this. On the one hand, it's really cool. On the other hand, I keep thinking about the digital divide and bias. And so I go back and forth on it. It's just, again, that conflict of it's just so cool, but I also wonder what the impact's going to be that only geographers see.
Gemini is interesting because I feel like it's the equivalent of that meme of wrong answers only. And it's really off-brand for Google because they're usually so good at making a product that is very robust and good, but Gemini is just not. It's the Bing of AI. I'll put it that way.
Wait, I thought Copilot was the Bing of AI.
No, Copilot is actually not awful. It's just, Copilot is, all right, so having played with all of these now, I can say a little bit about it. Copilot is very Microsoft centric. So basically, if you live in a SharePoint environment and you have a lot of Office things and Exchange and Outlook and all that stuff like that, it's in Teams. It's great. It's absolutely great. If you don't, it's all right. It does fine. It's adequate. It does a reasonably decent job. However, it's nowhere near. It's a little harsh to say that because it does get Chat GPT on the back end and whatnot. And Chat GPT is actually pretty decent as these things go. But anyway, it's
But
okay.
they all suck because we're still early days, and they all
We are
suck.
early
And
days.
even though people think they're wonderful, they're not yet.
Well, again, I'm just comparing them to themselves, but Gemini is definitely the big K of sodas in the AI world right now. I find Gemini among all of them is uniquely confident in its wrongness. Like all the other ones are a little bit like, well, it seems to be this, and this is our source, but Gemini is, it's this. And you go, no, that's not true.
Yeah. I was going to say one of the other things that came out was the photorealistic 3D maps. Their experimental launch, and it's just I wanted to ask Sue what she thought, just because of working in that space of 3D, and Frank just looking at realism. It looks really nice. The terrain and the topography is just amazing.
So I will say I have played with them, but in the setting of Unity, and so which. To be honest, and actually, I wanted to talk about this at some point. So they're really gearing this to be part of their web experience, right? So it's actually not that easy to use the 3D, at least when I was playing with it earlier in the spring with a desktop development environment like Unity. But anyway, it's really, really good for certain places. But like when I was doing it, I was trying to do it for an area of Japan that is an urban environment, but not one of the big cities, and the building generation was horrible. But for the original demo I saw, so again, this info is a few months old, that I was playing with Tokyo when I decided to try it out. I mean, that was amazing, and so I think that technology is getting better. So what I think is, if you want to use it in an urban area that gets a lot of good data processing, it is actually pretty realistic. Now, ground level, which is what I was looking for, and again, this is the difference in your use of it. It still wasn't up to snuff, but that's not surprising. But the flyover and look at it was really, really impressive. So again, it's improving even at the ground level, but yeah, and they're pushed to keep it in the web and the AR experience, I think, is interesting. So again, that was a few months. So that was, I think, March when I was playing with that. So a few months old information now, but I mean, there was a lot there that I liked. I don't know if it was for my application. I ended up ripping it out of my application because there's just too many issues with it. Tokushima, which was the city I wanted to use it for. And
well, the licensing too.
Yeah, and then there was a licensing issue, like you had to embed it a certain way and stuff. So those are asides, but in terms of as you were asking, Barb, the look of it and everything, it was actually pretty impressive. So
yeah, so it's the same challenges as it's had all along. It seems like it looks really.
But that
cool.
was the question I'm going to ask at some point in the future for us to talk about is for those of us and this is just total opinion, is like I'm starting to see is desktop dying because we're back to on device. I think Google and some others are clearly saying, well, if you're going to pick one device that you can afford to have, it's going to be your phone. And so so the cloud idea of having many devices and having to switch between them maybe isn't as big a deal anymore, because it seems like it's just one device now. It's your phone for a lot of people. Or maybe I'm not. Maybe it's just, my anecdotal experience. But since I am a desktop lover, I would be sad to see that happen. But it just seems like a lot of the push is to just say, look, let's just get all this stuff on your phone, including the 3D mapping and stuff for Google.
Next up in the news, Apple has rolled out some new features in Apple Maps, particularly if you're into hiking and running. There's a whole new topographic map for trails. You can download it. You can customize your route. It links to your watch and to your phone. It's pretty neat looking. I can't say that I'm a big hiker, so not necessarily something that I would use a lot, but it's pretty nifty. I will say this about Apple Maps. I drove to Chicago and back, and because my new car has CarPlay, you basically have to use Apple Maps for that. But actually, I found it to be quite a bit superior to Google Maps, which was a bit of a surprise to me, having been a Google Maps devotee for years and years and years. So it's a pretty cool product. If you haven't checked it out, check it out again. It's worth the time.
I'll say that we tend to still use Wise in CarPlay.
All I know is that sitting in Chicago, and if you take the toll roads, it's 7.5 hours. And I was trying to avoid some of the tolls because it's a very brutal amount of tolls between here and Chicago. And so I plugged that into Google Maps and it was like, it's going to take 8.5 hours. And I was like, okay, well, that's an hour. But Apple came back and went, yeah, we can do it in 750. And I was like, oh, I'll take 20 minutes to avoid $50 in tolls, literally $50 in tolls. So,
okay.
I did see some interesting backwoods. I'll use the word woods in air quotes there of Indiana, but it worked.
Yeah. When I looked at this with the topographic hiking trails, I could see how it's really useful. It makes me think a lot of times of when I've seen this, it's been with again, that desktop to cloud municipalities using, and this with desktop analysis, but now having it available to someone to have it on their phone, which they have with them, I could see being a good way to keep people healthy and safe if it's available for the trails that people are going to. They also, I think, said they had like a Yelp of trails, which, was interesting.
Next up, the USGIF has announced the most recent additions to the GeoEnt program accreditation. So that's South Dakota State University and University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, which brings the total up now to 23 institutions who are currently USGIF accredited. I think SDSU's is an undergraduate certificate. Urbana-Champaign's is their graduate certificate and master's degrees in cyber GIS and geospatial data science. So again, kind of a variety, just depending on what you're looking at in terms of GeoEnt and the direction that you want to go in. Each of these 23 have different focus areas, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. We, of course, are probably, actually we may have missed it, but the announcement for the deadline was at the end of last month. So we should be seeing in the next month or so the announcement of those people who got the scholarships, because the scholarships are recently
scholarship
due.
program.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you are a student and you are interested in GeoEnt, and again, USGIF takes that as a very broad definition of what GeoEnt is, then you should definitely be looking at both the accredited programs, membership as an individual, as a student, and definitely at the scholarships. And those, of course, will come back around next year in the spring. And finally in the news, Wingtra released a piece of mapping software called WingtraCloud. Wingtra is one of those UAV, UAS companies. And the only reason I point this out is not because WingtraCloud is something that is unique. In fact, it's probably built on somebody else's application, but it's the fact that so many of these are creating stacks that include their own mapping applications. So whether we're talking about DJI, Wingtra, we can point to other companies like Pix4D, which of course those of you who are using the advanced version of
Drone to Map,
part of Pix4D, those of you who are using the standard are using essentially the stuff that was part of the software that was 3D Robotics, whose name I just forgot as well.
Well, there's actually some Pix4D in the standard too, which I don't really understand exactly why, but it's a piece that I guess Esri talked them into letting education have.
Yes, but it's not.
I don't really understand.
Yeah, it doesn't require the extra tier of Esri paying.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's interesting about Drone to Map is that there are magic algorithms behind the curtain that it's a secret sauce, and they go, we change it. Don't ask.
And so all of the different drone companies have one of these. I think Autel has one. I'm not sure about the company that's in California who starts with an S, Skydio. I'm sure they do too. I mean, basically, if there's a drone manufacturer that considers themselves to be enterprise, then they probably have an app. And that app is either built on open source tools like Open Drone Map, or is pulling in from someone else's and paying them to use the software in the background in the cloud. So it's just a nice thing about the cloud is that, you can just kind of toss things in there and pay for the licensing and call it your own.
Unless they want to push it to your device.
I think, anything that helps to make, like they said, they're working a lot with onboarding, streamlining, organizing files and basically coordination and connectivity. And having worked a lot with students in surveying and also surveyors, I think this is a good idea because it's necessary, if you're a company or a business, to have anything that makes doing all this easier.
Yes, it is. It is good for the business to keep you in their ecosystem, to keep giving them money. I agree. And that's kind of what it comes down to, whether it's Wingtra or DJI or anybody. It's, it's the fact they want to keep you there, giving them the subscription, as opposed to going to Maps Made Easy or ArcGIS or whoever. Yeah.
Pix4D or, whatever.
That is out there. So just keep in mind that your hardware manufacturer may not be the best software for your use case. It might be. So check out what's out there.
I think that having a plan and knowing why you're using something is good.
Yeah, but the marketing people and, of course, the money people are betting on you not knowing a lot and just kind of following along.
Yeah. That's right.
The marketing people are saying, we have a plan. Buy ours.
Shiny. It's shiny.
Yeah. And you just hit a button and the magic just all works. And you go, well, I like just hitting buttons and magic works. So that's what happens.
But now I've got 25 buttons, right? We're back to that again.
Whereas I'm rocking 5 different pieces of software from data collection through to output in my drone processing. Why? Just because it's the way I've done it for the last 5 years. So why change it now?
Sometimes you find a tool set that works and it just works. The number of people that try to talk me into QGIS, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to. They're like, yeah, but you just do these. And I'm like, I get your little, in my opinion, duct tape, but your infrastructure works for you. But that took energy to build, and I know it. And I don't expect you to abandon that.
But I have spent X number of years using this, and so my duct tape works well for me.
Yes.
Your duct tape works well for you.
Some cases, my feeling is something's better than nothing. And, there are a lot of people out there more than they think there should be that are operating with nothing.
Yeah.
And
no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love QGIS. I don't use it every day. I do use it. So I don't have the same feelings that Frank does about duct tape in that context. But I definitely agree with him that, all of us are, the things that we have put together over decades are duct tape. And maybe that's the conversation today, is what duct tape have we put together to keep us going this long? Because, from, I guess I would argue probably Sue is maybe the longest in the official GIS, though I might parallel her with using Corel Draw to make maps for
you mean my
sites.
My brief encounter sideswipe with grass way back in the day.
Yeah, well, and the pluggers and those type of things where you were collecting the points.
Sideswipe on the grass. That's what.
Well, it was more like a convergence in space and time, and I'm like, not any attempt to go out and get it.
Got his job. What was it? 99, 2000.
2000. I got my job, and I said in the interview that I've always been fascinated by GPS, and they went GIS, and I went, oh.
That too.
So, be sure to hire
there you
me.
go.
Yeah, and
they're not the same.
Yeah, so I knew nothing going and starting that job, but obviously on-the-job training has been key to my career.
So I just completed the early career training for pre-tenure faculty, and we had to say about what was our exposure to geography and GIS. And a lot of people are like, I love maps since I was, in kindergarten or was exposed to them early. And I was like, well, let me tell you about the time I showed, Jesse and Sue and Dr. Martis this really poor map I made for my master's degree. And they said, do you realize you're violating all these principles? And this map's not actually as good as you think it is.
But it was a map.
It was a map, but it was not it was a learning experience. It was a start.
And so a little more recent, what we call that 12 years ago?
Something like that. I mean, right around 2010, give or
14
take.
then. 14, 15.
Yeah. I was working with, I think that was in SPSS or R. It was one of those.
Before R was big.
or R. So it must have been SPSS or something.
Well, that's what we used in the political science program was SPSS. So.
All I know is I had maxed out all the things I could, and they were like, could you just do less counties? And it was like, no, I want all these counties.
But so, yeah, we all have duct tape from decades now of using this stuff. And I don't know, what is it? We're all teaching at some level, and we're supposed to be moving into the modern GIS. And so I think my question vis-a-vis the duct tape is, how much are you focusing on the quote unquote modern GIS versus a combination of, these things are cool, but people still need to know these things on desktop? So what are your thoughts on that? Where do you stand right now?
So I like having my foot in both sides of this camp simultaneously. On the one hand, for example, I have as part of my director of institutional effectiveness role, we take the addresses of our students and we put them on a map. And honestly, I've not found a better way to do it than Arc Pro. It just works, bringing in the data, geocoding it, moving on from there. And when I try to do it in the cloud, it doesn't work very well. Part of that is because the state of West Virginia has a very good geocoder, because there's a lot of money spent on that. But the cloud, I have trouble connecting it with the state of West Virginia's geocoder. I don't know if that's the state's problem or Esri's problem, but all I know is that when I go into Pro, it works. So since 88.43% of our student body is West Virginians, that's important. So I need to have that geocoder first, and then I use Esri's credits to do the number 11.57% that aren't West Virginia. So I like using the cloud for a lot of the stuff, and I find it a very good way for our student body to get their feet wet without being frightened. And I enjoy that. Story maps in particular, I find it to be a gateway drug, because they can get their head around that fairly easily, because it's kind of like building a website basically, and they understand that. But largely, I feel like you've got to learn some of the mechanics on the desktop. And I found Pro to be the best way to teach that stuff. I would never show them QGIS because, well, I hate it.
Again, that's a personal thing. We get it.
The reason I hate it is the way it thinks about the world, like the way it goes, go here, here, and here. That's just not how I would conceive of doing whatever task it is. I'm going go there or here and the other place. So it's a really struggle for me to think like QGIS, which is why I don't dislike it. But it actually is very effective if you can understand how to think like it.
And so if you've used MapInfo, if you've used, what's it called? Hexagon Geospatial's GIS. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Wait, who had Map 3D? They literally called it Map 3D.
No, that's Autodesk.
That's Autodesk. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's something else. But yeah, their interfaces were very much, QGIS, I think, builds on a combination of ArcGIS and those other two products, which were the big products when QGIS started. And QGIS just hasn't changed its interface to go to the ribbon interface. And that's fine. It shouldn't if it doesn't need to. And so I think since I used those products back in the day, my mentality of understanding where QGIS is coming from is a little bit easier. But if you didn't have a reason to use, I can't remember the name of who owned it back in the day either, that Hexagon Geospatial bought it from. Yeah.
Intergraph.
Intergraph. I still can't remember the name of the GIS.
I can't remember the name of the software, but it was Intergraph. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you use that, if you used MapInfo, if you used ArcView a lot, then some of these things make a lot more sense. I don't know where I was going with that, but that's, so then what are your thoughts on the duct tape that you're using, that you're kind of passing down to the next group? I mean, are they just mostly working in ArcGIS Online, or do you have them do something in another class that goes beyond that?
Well, I'm gonna toss this to Barbara in a second, but I do want to say that a difference in my career now that literally has been the last 2 years than before is that as a developer, my duct tape was, I'll just write the damn thing myself. That was more or less my go-to move. And so I wasn't using the tools quite as much as I'll just give me the APIs, get out of my way. I'll take care of it. And in my current position, I just don't have the need for that. And to some extent, the latitude for that. So I've had to start kind of rethinking my duct tape tool belt from a more application centric. And that's part of the reason I think I've fallen back on some of the Arc Pro that I know, but also let's see what the cloud can do. Let's do it and figure that out there. Now, as the curriculum is currently laid out at Fairmont State, I'm basically teaching intro to geography courses, and Barbara teaches the GIS classes, so she should better answer this question.
So, because remember, this is a fairly new program and we had so much trouble getting our license. Again, something that is a learning experience.
Context real quick.
You've
had your license for like 3 months?
No. We've had it for
since March.
Since March. So basically it took us over almost a year to get to the purchasing of the state. Yeah. It had nothing to do with as
before that you had a lab license, right? For a little while.
We had a lab license, but it was very, very limited. There's only a few things you can do. Now we've got an institutional license, which is basically like everybody else's. It's just the amount of money you pay and the amount of credits and seats you get depends on the size of your student body. So
that was the only context. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood. Whenever you say new, we're talking like a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah. Less than 3.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of things that are not in the lab license that are in the institutional license.
But I will say my approach is one that respects the duct tape. And here's why. Because I have students that come from a lot of different professions, and some of them are already in their fields. And we talk about best practices and using what is used in your area in your profession. And then also how you bring in the, can basically convince people to transition into modern GIS so we try to use different products similar to the way that I was trained. And then we spend a lot of time reflecting and talking about the process of using them, because this is something that they're going to have to grapple with if you go into the workplace and you are only given certain tools. So, for example, in certain fields, they're only going to have QGIS, but in others, they're going to have Arc Pro. In others, they're still going to be using other things, especially if they're coming out of somewhere that's survey engineering. So, since it's still a new program, we're starting out by doing basically a survey, an overview, and touching everything and finding out what you use in your profession, what you like, what you're struggling with, how you would approach using this if you're in somewhere that has to do the transition. Because I think for a lot of professionals now, even at the level of the state and region, they're being asked to do that transition that we're in with varying degrees of acceptance or resistance. So I guess how am I doing it? I'm living in both worlds, because I think everyone, at least in certain areas, is going to end up living in both worlds. Yes. But we're heavily ESRI.
Yeah, so as part of the West Virginia Association of Geospatial Professionals, which Barb and I are both board members now, a lot of our membership is still kicking and screaming over ArcMap from August. So, there is a lot of duct tape built around ArcMap that they've got in their day-to-day jobs, and they have no interest in moving into the new age at all of Arc Pro, much less an online thing. So there is a lot of initiative, or not initiative, but there's a lot of momentum basically in one direction. So the expectation that you would hear at UC is not the existence that we have in West Virginia, by and large.
And I think it's going to be a lot of places are going to be in the same boat. And so I think that disconnect between how you'd want it if it was a perfect world and how it is in the real world. I think people need to learn about the duct tape, because it's how we all live, or most of us do, with the resources we have.
I think the big thing here, just to talk about the transition, is it's the mid-career and late career people that are going to be the most against doing it, because it's what they've done. Why should I have to learn how to do another thing? This is what they were taught in school. And, it's the problem, right? Whenever we are teaching a piece of software, people just embed themselves in that mentality Frank. And just, how do we, I don't know. That's part of the duct tape is, how do we keep the ideas and stuff that we've been building over the last few decades in the GIS education space with this push for the modern GIS that Esri and a couple of other companies really want to push for the cloud movement. So yeah, it's part of that question.
Well, I think I don't think I'm necessarily disagreeing with everybody here, but I think it's more than that. And I think that, the points that you and Barb have raised, Frank, is that, and I'll give an example, sort of an area in which that I see this, right, that having to understand the duct tape, and that's around handling data. And yes, you could say, well, the people that don't want to move from Arc, I mean, there was I don't remember it being quite as, the move from ArcView and ArcInfo, I don't remember as being quite painful. Maybe that was because there were fewer, like the community was smaller then.
Well, we were moving from command line to a GUI.
Yeah, but ArcView was our kind of visual one. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it was more of, wow, this is amazing what this can do. And the Pro one is maybe a little bit more lateral in terms of like what it looks like and stuff. But anyway, but I think when you think about data, right, is that the modern GIS approach, and this is just my opinion, like when I'm working with students in the educational environment, right, what data is like is much less overt, right, in using stuff, right? So students struggle when they say, oh, well, I did this analysis, and I got to admit, I don't use the online tools. If I do analysis, it's still in Pro. And my duct tape is, if Pro throws me one of those ridiculous ambiguous errors, then I go and run it. I still sneakily, like hiding behind the counter, I still sneakily run the data in ArcMap. Because I can recognize the result, right? Not anymore, but that was my duct tape on duct tape, right? Is if I couldn't get it to process the way I wanted, I would try to go see what was going on. But I think that as you see this transition, right, in how we understand those fundamental pieces, we run into the problem of legacy, right? Which is a problem for everybody, right? We all remember now like the physical hardware legacy of how storage devices changed. And when somebody would come to, like I still remember, and I use this example, I think a half dozen times on the podcast over the years, right? The student that came to me holding up a zip disk and said, my biology professor needs the data on this. And then she stopped and she went, what is this? And I had to tell her it's a zip disk. And she's like, all right, so how do I get the data off it? And I laughed. I'm like, you have to have a zip drive. And then their brief moment of time, right, that the zip drive had their glory, which lasted, 8 months? You could get computers with zip drives in them or buy portable zip drives. I'm like, the data as far as the rest of the world is concerned does not exist if you cannot extract it from this device. But I think in this transition, right, in our duct tape processes, right, a lot of them revolved around data. And it's why I still make students work with shapefiles, because they could potentially end up in a place where there are shapefiles and products that are outside of the Esri ecosystem where we're making this move to modern GIS, right, if they're not doing the same thing, they're still going to be in that world. So QGIS and other worlds are still going to work with these more traditional data formats. So I'm using kind of the data thing as an example. So I think that it's a broader question, like how much do you pass that along? Because it's part of working with physical data. That's why I kind of joked earlier in the news about kind of the death of desktop, right? Because understanding file types and file structures, and I can remember like everybody we were using, and when this QGIS was one of these, right? If you didn't understand, or City Engine as an example in the Esri ecosystem, right? If you didn't understand how file directories and hierarchies worked, right? Because people who constructed their data storage around those, you were just like, what is happening, right? I don't know where this file went. I don't know why I can't save it. I don't know why it's throwing me an error. All right, now we pass it along to the cloud-based stuff, and a lot of that is hidden because, you run something in an ArcGIS Online, it'll go into your content as a user, right? Which is a very different way to see where files are going. And it's not truly necessarily a file as we would understand it. All right, so they're trying to wrap their heads around that and then see something on a physical device. So anyway, so it's kind of a long-winded way to get back to, I think it is important that we expose them and preserve some of these things because as Barb said, right, we're in the transition time. And the cloud very much is dependent on having this offsite server and somebody managing this in a place where you're your data and your products are going, and that you generally don't have control over. So that's another issue with it, right? So, but if you don't understand kind of the legacy, the transition into it, and how to work with those other things, or find somebody who did know, then it's really going to be hard to accomplish your projects.
So my question real quick is, when have we not been in a transition period?
Well, that's fair enough, right?
I was thinking that because I was also laughing because at our state conference, I was telling people about a project or my students had done where they were doing, I had them do the audit of where everything is, Sue, for a cemetery. You can't start just making the map. You got to start somewhere, and for the good of this organization, you have to start with what do they have? And of course, they're going to swear they have information. And what form is it in? It's in a PDF Excel sheet, Excel spreadsheet in a PDF. And I think everyone's been there, and everyone at the conference, that it's a shared experience of having your best laid plans going, getting off track because you have to go back to what do the people you're working with have, not what are you doing in your ideal environment, but what's the real situation here. So
it's a big chunk of confusing the difference between data and information. Do you have the data? Yes, we have the data. No, you have the information. You don't actually have data, not in a meaningful way. And now we got to convert your information back into data so we can create more information. That's always a big frustration, particularly when we're talking to non-GIS people. But, so you brought up something that is I hit an era of technology that I'm struggling with, which is the first time this has really happened in my career, is this notion of a data lake. So essentially that's what ArcGIS Online is that we throw the data up there in this big lake, and the way you access it is you connect with it because you know the name of it, or you know who made it, or some attribute about it. That's the way you connect it. Me, I don't organize my brain that way. I'm used to organizing files and folders and subfolders and all that sort of stuff. So I won't necessarily remember what the hell I called something, but I'll remember, it's a project, so it's in the project folder. And it's, that looks right, 2024. It's on 2024. Oh, what is this? This is something to do with this process. Oh, right, there's a folder for that type of thing. And so I can kind of find my way to wherever the heck it is that I saved it. And this data lake thing is just throwing me for a loop because I got to remember a whole different types of things. And I have to come up with names to mimic my thing. I have to come up with names that are really obnoxious for files, because then it helps me go, well, one of these words would have gotten me there. This is where I need AI to get better, because if I use synonyms for things, it'll go, did you mean these things? Like, yeah, that's the thing I needed. That, if I don't use the exact term. And that's been a huge challenge for me. And what keeps me from wanting to engage with the cloud is fully. I actually like it and I use it a lot, but the fact that I had trouble finding things because of this data lake concept. Whereas if I use Pro, it's in this folder, which is that subfolder, and this subfolder, and this is the file. And, that's a lot easier for me.
And so these are different pieces of duct tape, gaffing tape, translucent Scotch tape, whatever kind of tape you use to keep things going.
Wishes and prayers.
And yeah, I mean, we're always making it up as we go along because there's always new things that we need to embrace and include, and you just can't cover everything because there's so
That's right.
too much.
And if this safe space, I'm going to admit that I'm not going to uninstall ArcMap. Not yet. It's not happening.
License isn't gonna, you're not going to have a license for it, so it doesn't matter. That's it. There's no more licenses.
I'm still not going to uninstall it.
But it won't run without a license. So.
I wonder if I can generate a...
No, there are no... We will not have licenses to generate a license file for the license server.
That
it
ship
has sailed. It has sailed. But I'm probably just not going to uninstall it just because the icon comforts me. For all that we hated and let it to burn down ArcMap, it's just the idea of installing it, not having that icon on my desktop. It just makes me sad.
But I wanted to say it shows how creative we are. If there's one thing that connects us, I think that duct tape shows that we're creative and dynamic. That it's one of the things that people always say once they start getting into geospatial stuff is that, we are able to move with whatever's thrown at us. And I think that's a plus.
I know they're not listening, but I would like to caution all you public health people and your ecology people and all the people who use GIS occasionally, particularly for academia. You'll find a paper that was written in 2008 that has an algorithm that does the type of analysis you want to do, and it's not been upgraded since ARC 9 point whatever the hell.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing you can do about that.
You can probably find it. It's probably built in now. The number of old tools that are now part of just the existing toolbox.
There are a bunch, but there are a lot that aren't.
You just have
there
to, and here
because
go back to the thing. You have to know what the stupid tool is called.
Some master's student somewhere wrote it in a thesis, and trust me, when I was at an R1, this happened at least 3 times a year. They would say it only works in ARC 9.2 or whatever, and I go, I don't want to tell you.
Yeah, because
you have the algorithm. It's in the article. You have the developer capability.
And they were like, can we just get a license for that? And it's like, no. And Esri was good about occasionally giving me those, but ARC Map's gone now. So you're going to have to rewrite that thing. That sucks.
This is something I learned about GIS journals, which is they are making these algorithms and everything available. They're open.
And that's the nice, as much as I complain about R and people trying to do GIS in R, you can run these tools, pulling from your GIS data set, run the tool, bring the data back in to do your cartography or take your, wherever you're going to do your cartography. So, the duct tape is all the different pieces that we have access to. Yes, we have our ones that we've used more than anything else, but all of us, we use the tool that is needed to get the project done, even if we have to learn that tool.
And please bring it into a cartographic tool. Asterisks and @ symbols are not cartography, not anymore. So much beyond that. Bring it into a proper tool.
So there you go. That's it for this time. Hopefully we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll see how it goes, as we are now 1 month-ish, 1 month and 5 days from our 19th anniversary.
Yeah, 1/9.
Look at that. We should start wearing berets.
I am disturbed by that 90s reference.
Well, it's just about 19. You're in college or
if you were in the 90s, yes. But now I don't know what they do at 19. But it would not be a beret.
No, probably not. But they're still probably reading, Proust and other things.
We had a student like to dress like Karl Marx and used to wander the history halls. Perhaps Jesse didn't see him. Yeah, full on.
Well, we had those at WVU.
Or, maybe not Karl Marx, more intelligentsia, we'll call it, like late 19th century Russian intelligentsia.
I think that's back. Dark academia. Students dress in the full outfit. Early 19th century garb.
And that's it for this week. So, of course, if you'd like us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email, podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I'm Barb at VerySpatial.com.
And you can reach me at Frank at VerySpatial.com.
I'm available at Kind of Spatial. You can find all of our contact information over at VerySpatial.com/contacts.
As always,
we're the folks from VerySpatial.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks.